The neon lights of Terminus Station's lower market cast sickly shadows across the grimy floor where unwanted goods were sold for scraps. Captain Dex Morrison pulled his worn leather jacket tighter as he navigated through the maze of vendors hawking everything from rusted ship parts to questionable food rations. He wasn't here by choice. His cargo hauler needed a new plasma converter, and the lower markets were the only place his dwindling credits could stretch. That's when he saw her, huddled. In a corner cage barely large enough for a child, sat the most beautiful creature he'd ever laid eyes on. Her skin shimmered with an opalescent quality that seemed to capture and reflect the station's harsh lighting, transforming it into something almost magical. Long silver hair cascaded over her shoulders, partially hiding a face marked by hunger and exhaustion. She was clearly Veltharian, one of the rare star-walking species known for their incredible beauty and mysterious abilities. "What's wrong with that one?" Dex asked the slovenly trader lounging nearby. The man spat into a cup and shrugged. Defective merchandise, been through 6 owners in 2 months, won't perform, barely eats, just sits there like a broken doll. Practically giving her away at this point. Dex's jaw clenched. He'd heard stories about the illegal alien trade that flourished in the Outer Rim stations. Seeing it firsthand made his stomach turn. The girl, who couldn't have been more than 20 in human years, lifted her head slightly. Their eyes met for just a moment, and Dex saw something that made his heart skip. Not defeat, but a quiet dignity that refused to be crushed despite everything she'd endured. "How much?" he heard himself asking. The trader's eyes lit up with greedy interest. "For you, friend, only 800 credits. She's exotic, even if she's useless." 800 credits was nearly everything Dex had left, but he couldn't walk away. Not from those eyes that held so much pain, yet still sparked with defiant life. He counted out the worn credit chips, his hands steady, despite the magnitude of what he was doing. "Throw in the cage key and we have a deal." Minutes later, he was kneeling beside the cramped cage, key in hand. The Veltharian girl watched him warily as he slowly unlocked the door. She didn't move at first, as if unable to believe this was really happening. "Easy there," Dex said softly, extending his hand palm up in what he hoped was a universal gesture of peace. "My name's Dex. I'm not going to hurt you." She studied his face for a long moment before slowly emerging from the cage. Standing, she was taller than he'd expected, almost matching his height. Her movements were graceful despite her obvious weakness. And Dex found himself wondering what terrible circumstances had led to her being here. "Can you understand me?" he asked gently. She nodded once, her voice barely above a whisper. "I understand. My name is Kira." The sound of her voice, musical, despite her exhaustion, sent an unexpected warmth through Dex's chest. There was intelligence in her eyes, and strength that spoke of a spirit that had been tested but not broken. "Well, Kira," he said, offering her his jacket, "how would you feel about getting off this station? I've got a ship, and it's not much, but it's better than here." For the first time since he'd seen her, something that might have been hope flickered across her features. The Wanderer's hope wasn't much to look at. A converted cargo hauler that had seen better decades, but to Kira, it might as well have been a palace. Dex watched as she explored the small living quarters he'd hastily prepared for her, her fingers trailing along surfaces as if she couldn't quite believe they were real. "The refresher is through that door," he said, pointing to a narrow alcove. "Water's hot if you give it a minute. There are clean clothes in the locker. Might be a bit big, but they're better than." He gestured at the tattered rags she wore. Kira turned to face him, and for a moment they simply looked at each other. The artificial gravity hummed softly. Around them, and somewhere in the distance, the ship's recycling systems whispered their eternal song. It was peaceful in a way that seemed to surprise her. "Why?" she asked suddenly. "Why did you buy me?" Dex ran a hand through his dark hair, suddenly feeling awkward under her intense gaze. "I don't know," he admitted. "Something about leaving you there felt wrong. Really wrong." She tilted her head, studying him with those remarkable eyes that seemed to shift color in the ship's lighting. "You spent everything you had. I heard you counting the credits." "Credits come and go," Dex said, with a shrug that was meant to seem casual. "Besides, I've got a job lined up that'll cover expenses." It wasn't entirely true. The job he'd mentioned was a dangerous run through pirate-controlled space, the kind that paid well precisely because most captains were smart enough to avoid it. But looking at Kira, seeing the way some of the tension had left her shoulders since boarding his ship, he knew he'd made the right choice. Over the next few days, as they traveled toward the Kepler system, Dex began to learn more about his unexpected passenger. Kira was incredibly intelligent, picking up the ship's basic systems with an ease that amazed him. She had an intuitive understanding of stellar mechanics that went far beyond anything he'd learned in his years of space travel. Your people navigate by the stars themselves, don't they? Oft one evening, as they shared a simple meal in the ship's small galley, Kira nodded, a wistful expression crossing her face. We call it star singing. Every celestial body has its own resonance. We can feel them, hear them in a way. It's how we've traveled between worlds for millennia. That's incredible, Dex breathed. I've heard rumors about Veltharian navigators, but I thought they were just stories, not stories, Kira said softly, though perhaps they should remain so. My abilities are part of what made me valuable to certain people. The pain in her voice made Dex's chest tighten. He reached across the small table without thinking, his fingers brushing against hers. The contact sent a small shock through both of them, and Kira's eyes widened in surprise. I'm sorry. Dex started to pull his hand back, but Kira's fingers curled around his, holding him in place. No, she said quietly. It's been so long since someone touched me with kindness. They sat like that as the ship hummed around them, two lost souls finding something unexpected in each other's presence. And for the first time in years, neither of them felt quite so alone. The asteroid field stretched endlessly before them, a treacherous maze of spinning rock and ice that would test even the most experienced pilot. Dex's hands moved over the controls with practiced precision, but sweat beaded on his forehead as he navigated between the massive chunks of debris. Proximity alert, the ship's computer announced in its maddeningly calm voice. Impact probability increasing. I can see that, Dex muttered, pulling hard to starboard to avoid a particularly nasty piece of twisted metal, probably from some poor ship that hadn't made it through. Beside him, Kira sat in the co-pilot's seat, her eyes closed in concentration. Over the past week, she'd grown stronger, the hollow look leaving her cheeks as proper nutrition and rest worked their magic. But it was more than physical healing. There was something between them now, a connection that seemed to grow stronger. With each passing day, there, she said suddenly, her eyes snapping open. 2 degrees port, then dive 30 degrees down plane. The currents will carry us through. Currents, Dex asked, but he was already adjusting course, trusting her instincts completely. The asteroids create gravitational eddies, Kira explained, her voice taking on an almost musical quality as she spoke. I can feel them, like rivers flowing through space. Follow the current, and it will guide us safely. Dex had never heard anything like it, but as he followed her directions, the ship seemed to flow through the field with an almost supernatural grace. They danced between obstacles that should have been impossible to navigate, riding invisible currents that only Kira could perceive. How do you do it? He asked in wonder as they cleared the field and entered open space once more. Kira turned to look at him, and something had changed in her expression. The guarded wariness that had been there since the station was gone, replaced by something softer, more vulnerable. It's not something I do, she said quietly. Something I am. My people believe the stars themselves flow through our blood. Without thinking, Dex reached for her hand again. This time, when their skin touched, the sensation was electric, but neither pulled away. Instead, Kira leaned closer, and Dex found himself drowning in the depths of her eyes. Dex, she whispered. And his name on her lips was the most beautiful sound he'd ever heard. Time seemed to stop as they moved closer together. The vast emptiness of space surrounded them, but here in this small pocket of warmth and light, nothing else existed. When their lips finally met, it was like coming home after a lifetime of wandering. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, as if they were both afraid this moment might shatter like glass. But as Kira's arms wound around his neck and she pressed closer, Dex felt something inside him that had been cold and empty for years suddenly burst into flame. They broke apart finally, both breathing hard, foreheads touching as they tried to process what had just happened. "I never thought," Kira whispered, her voice trembling. "After everything that was done to me, I never thought I could feel this way about anyone." Dex cupped her face gently in his hands, his thumbs tracing the elegant lines of her cheekbones. "You're safe now," he said fiercely. "I swear to you, no one will ever hurt you again." As if to seal his promise, she kissed him again, and this time there was no hesitation, no fear. Just two hearts that had found each other in the infinite darkness, creating their own constellation of hope. Part 4. The Bond. That transcends species, the observation deck of the Wanderer's Hope offered a spectacular view of the nebula they were currently skirting, its swirling colors painting them both in shades of pink and gold. Kira stood pressed against the reinforced viewport, her reflection ghost-like in the transparent aluminum, while Dex watched her from across the small space. 3 weeks had passed since their first kiss, and the relationship between them had deepened into something neither had expected. They moved around each other with an easy intimacy now, their conversations flowing from the practical to the profound with comfortable ease. "Tell me about your world," Dex said softly, coming to stand behind her. His arms encircled her waist, and she leaned back against his chest with a contented sigh. "Velthar Prime," she said, her voice taking on that wistful quality he'd come to recognize. "Imagine mountains that reach so high they pierce the clouds, with cities carved into their faces that gleam like jewels. They're harmonizing with the stellar winds that flow between the peaks." "It sounds incredible," Dex murmured, pressing a kiss to the sensitive spot where her neck met her shoulder. The gesture sent a shiver through her that he felt against his chest. It was, she agreed, but her tone had shifted, becoming heavier, until the war came. Dex had suspected there was more to her story than she'd shared. The way she sometimes flinched at unexpected sounds, the nightmares that occasionally woke her in the small hours, the careful way she watched doorways and exits. These weren't the habits of someone who'd simply fallen on hard times. "You don't have to tell me," he said gently. But Kira turned in his arms, her hands coming up to rest on his chest. "I want to," she said firmly. "You deserve to know what you've taken on." They settled together on the small couch that dominated one side of the observation deck. Kira curled against Dex's side as she began to speak. "I wasn't just any Veltharian," she said quietly. "I was part of the Navigators Guild, one of the most respected positions in our society. My star-singing abilities were particularly strong. I could find safe passage through the most dangerous regions of space, chart new routes that others couldn't even perceive." Dex remained silent, sensing there was more to come. "When the hegemony invaded," Kira continued, "they specifically targeted navigators. We were too valuable to kill, but too dangerous to leave free. They collected us, sold us to the highest bidders as living navigation systems." The pain in her voice made Dex's arms tighten around her protectively. "The people who owned you before?" he said, understanding dawning. Kira nodded against his shoulder. "Ship captains, mostly. They would lock me in a cage barely large enough to stand in, bring me out only when they needed to navigate a particularly treacherous region. I was fed just enough to keep my abilities sharp, nothing more." Dex breathed, horror washing over him as he imagined what she'd endured. "The worst part," Kira whispered, "wasn't the hunger or the confinement. It was the way they looked at me, like I was a tool, a piece of equipment, with no thoughts or feelings of my own. I began to wonder if they were right, if that's all I was." Dex pulled back just enough to look into her eyes, his hands framing her face with infinite tenderness. "They were wrong," he said fiercely. "You're not a tool or a possession. You're brilliant and strong and beautiful, and any man would be lucky to have you choose to stay with him." Tears sparkled in Kira's eyes, but she was smiling. "Choose," she repeated. Such a simple word, but I'd almost forgotten what it meant. "And what do you choose?" Dex asked, his heart hammering against his ribs as he waited for her answer. Instead of speaking, Kira kissed him, pouring all her gratitude and growing love into the contact. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. "I choose you," she whispered, "for as long as you'll have me." Under the swirling lights of the nebula, They made love with a tenderness that spoke of healing and hope to damaged souls finding wholeness in each other's arms. The ship that dropped out of hyperspace directly in their path was sleek, predatory, and unfortunately familiar. Dex's blood ran cold as he recognized the distinctive hull markings of a hegemony hunter, the kind of vessel specifically designed to track down escaped property. "They found me," Kira whispered from beside him, her face pale but determined. "I'm sorry, Dex. I should have known they wouldn't stop looking." "Like hell," Dex snarled, his hands flying over the controls as he brought the Wanderer's hope around in a sharp turn.
Ah! I'm not letting them take you.
The hunter ship was faster and better armed, but Dex had something they didn't: a navigator. Who could read the very fabric of space itself? As Kira closed her eyes and extended her senses, feeling for the stellar currents that flowed invisibly around them, Dex pushed his ship to its limits. "There," Kira said suddenly, her voice taking on that musical quality that always accompanied her star-singing. "A gravity well hidden behind the moon. If we can reach it before they lock weapons, we can lose them in the tidal forces." It was a desperate gamble, but Dex didn't hesitate, threading the needle between the moon's gravitational pull and the hunter ship's weapons lock. They dove toward the churning energies that marked the boundary of the gravity well. The hegemony ship followed, its captain either too confident or too stupid to recognize the danger. As they entered the well's influence, both ships were caught in forces that would have torn apart anything less expertly piloted. But with Kira's guidance, Dex rode the currents like a master surfer, while behind them, the hunter ship struggled against gravitational forces it couldn't predict or navigate. They watched through the rear viewer as the sleek predator was pulled into an uncontrollable spin, its hull beginning to buckle under stresses it wasn't designed to handle. Within minutes, it had been torn apart by the very forces it had followed them into. As they cleared the gravity well and entered normal space once more, Dex and Kira simply held each other, both shaking with the aftermath of their narrow escape. "They'll send others," Kira said quietly. "Then we'll face them together," Dex replied without hesitation. "I meant what I said. I'm not letting anyone take you from me." Kira pulled back to look at him, tears streaming down her face. "Even if it means living on the run. Never being able to settle anywhere? Always looking over our shoulders?" Dex cupped her face gently, thumbs wiping away her tears. "Kira, listen to me. I've spent 10 years wandering the galaxy, never finding anywhere that felt like home. Home isn't a place, it's you. Wherever you are, that's where I want to be." "I love you," she whispered, the words falling from her lips like a prayer. "I love you too," he replied, and kissed her with all the passion and promise of a man who'd found his future in the arms of a woman from the stars. Later, as they lay entwined in Dex's narrow bunk, planning their new course away from hegemony space, Kira traced lazy patterns on his chest. "Where will we go?" she asked. "Wherever the stars lead us," Dex said, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "I know some people in the free colonies. Traders who don't ask questions and don't care about hegemony law. We can build a life there." "Together," Kira said, not a question but a statement of fact. "Together," Dex confirmed. And as the Wanderer's hope set course for the unknown regions beyond the galaxy's edge, both of them knew they were heading towards something better than either had ever dared to dream. In the vast darkness of space, their love burned bright as any star, a beacon of hope that no force in the universe could extinguish.